matters financial and geopolitical from a frontier, and thank you for stopping by. My macro thoughts stay with the sell the euro theory. I think the euro is headed down to parity. I think Thomas Jordan effectively told us so. And I think, the Swiss franc move, as I said over the weekend, I think is an example of very arrhythmic financial markets. Home thoughts, we had this extraordinary rainstorm yesterday in Nairobi, and I came across an article, "Do you love the good smell of rain?" Which I do. If so, you're not alone. In fact, some scientists believe that people inherited their affection for the scent of rain from ancestors who relied on rainy weather for their survival. What makes rain smell so nice? There are several scents associated with rainfall that people find pleasing. One of these odors, called Petrichor, lingers when rain falls after a prolonged dry spell. Petrichor, the term was coined in 1964 by two Australian scientists studying the smells of wet weather, is derived from a pair of chemical reactions. Some plants secrete oils during dry periods, and when it rains, these oils are released into the air. The second reaction that creates petrichor occurs when chemicals produced by soil-dwelling bacteria, known as Actinomycetes, are released. These aromatic compounds combine to create the pleasant petrichor scent when rain hits the ground. When someone says they can smell rain coming, it may be that wind from an approaching storm has carried ozone down from the clouds and into the person's nostrils. And on that note, I'll jump with my home thoughts to Hannah riding along the shore at Lake Ellmenteita. And if you haven't been there, it really is a remarkable place to visit. And as you've no doubt worked out by now, the little one Hannah is a kind of indescribable love affair for me. And I love my older daughters, but the teenage world is a whole another ball game with its added complexities, especially when you're a father of teenage daughters, and all sorts of people start turning up at your door, or not. But in her 8th year, she was become a very cheeky pixie. And here I am, swinging a line in the futures market and wanting my day to start real smooth. And of course it starts with Hannah. Lately she has taken to asking rather crossly, "What are you doing in my room?" And I let my breath out slowly and look at her and ask her sotto voce, "What am I doing in your room, Hannah? I've come to tell you that I love you. And I want to start my day with your smile." And today I asked, "Darling, do you know the story about Emperor Babur and Humayoun?" And she said no. One day Humayoun fell ill, and Babur, of course, became very sad. Humayoun was his only son. Babur had come from way up in the Fergana Valley, had come down to Afghanistan, was now in northern India. And he obviously was keen, as people were in those days, on a son and heir. One day Humayoun fell ill, and Babur becomes very sad. He summoned the best doctor in his empire. The doctor treated Humayoun with utmost care, but his condition did not improve. The doctor finally said his condition is now fatal, and only God can save him. Babur lost all hope. With great sadness he knelt down and prayed. I didn't read this in full. I subsequently went and found the story, but I made the points. "God, please save my son." Of course, read my Hannah. Just then he heard the queen weeping. He consoled her and said, "Have faith in God. He alone can save our son." The queen requested the king to consult with Abdul Bakr, the most pious man in town. "Medicines have failed," said Abdul Bakr. "Still I believe that Humayoun will be all right. Pray to God and offer him the most valuable thing in your house." "What's the most valuable thing in my house?" asked Baba. "You have the most valuable diamond with you. Sell that diamond, and you will get lakhs of rupees. You may give the money to the poor. God may then save your son's life, said Abu Bakr. The diamond is no doubt very valuable, but my life is more valuable than the diamond, the king said to the pious man. I offer my life. Saying this, Babur walked around the bed of Humayoun. He knelt down and said, God, take my life and give my life to my son. Suddenly the doctor saw Humayoun uttering a few words. O Emperor, I can see his pulse beat. Your son will be normal soon, cried the pious man. God has answered my prayer. So saying, Babur fell down and died a little later. I think I made my point. Humayoun's tomb in Delhi is seen at night with the moon. And then this morning, since yesterday, someone tweeted a link for some East African tarab music. Coming from the Swahili coast, I actually find it very, very moving. And the link is there on the website if you care to have a listen. A very powerful mixture of Arabic and Swahili, and it's remarkable. President Barack Obama delivered his State of the Union address today. Interesting, we are 15 years into this new century, 15 years that dawned with terror touching our shores, that unfolded with a new generation fighting two long and costly wars, that saw vicious recession spread across our nation and the world. It has been and still is a hard time for many. Good start. But tonight we turn the page. Tonight, after a breakthrough year for America, our economy is growing, creating jobs at the fastest pace since 1999. Our unemployment rate is now lower than it was before the financial crisis. More of our kids are graduating than ever before. The shadow of crisis has passed, and the State of the Union is strong, he said. Growing economy, shrinking deficits, bustling industry, booming energy production. We have risen from recession freer to write our own future than any other nation on earth. It's now up to us to choose what we want to be over the next 15 years and for decades to come. Then talks of a family, a lady called Rebecca, who wrote to him about how that they bounced back, a strong, tight-knit family who has made it through some very, very hard times, and he extrapolates that to represent America. We believe we could reduce our dependence on foreign oil and protect our planet, and today America is number one in oil and gas. Every 3 weeks we bring online as much solar power as we did in 2008. It talks about the average family saving $750 a year at the pump. Fact. So the verdict is clear: middle class economics works. 21st century businesses need 21st century infrastructure, modern ports, stronger bridges, faster trains, and the fastest internet. I want Americans to race for the kinds of discoveries that unleash new jobs, converting sunlight into liquid fuel. Last month we launched a new spacecraft as part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars. In 2 months, to prepare us for those missions, Scott Kelly will begin a year-long stay in space. Good luck, Captain. Make sure to Instagram it. Of course, if there's one thing this new century has taught us, it's that we cannot separate our work at home from challenges beyond our shores. First duty as Commander-in-Chief is to defend the US. In doing so, the question is not whether America leads in the world, but how. When we make rash decisions, reacting to the headlines instead of using our heads, when the first response to a challenge is to send in our military, then we risk getting drawn into unnecessary conflicts and neglect the broader strategy we need for a safer, more prosperous world. That's what our enemies want us to do, he said. I believe in a smarter kind of American leadership, and I think he's very smart, actually. We lead best when we combine military power with strong diplomacy, when we leverage our power with coalition building. We will continue to hunt down terrorists and dismantle their networks. We're demonstrating the power of American strength and diplomacy. Now listen to this is Putin. We're upholding the principle that bigger nations can't bully the small by opposing Russian aggression, supporting Ukraine's democracy, and reassuring our NATO allies. Last year, as we were doing the hard work of imposing sanctions along with our allies, some suggested that Mr. Putin's aggression was a masterful display of strategy and strength. Well, today it is America that stands strong and united with our allies, while Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters. Of course, he is the oil and currency warfare specialist that achieved that. Well, people under his command, but it's extraordinary that somebody not in business, not in the markets, understood that so clearly. And really it was a significant win with respect to the US national interest. That's how America leads, not with bluster, but with persistent, steady resolve. Talking about Iran, our diplomacy is at work with respect to Iran, where for the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress of its nuclear program, reduced its stockpile of nuclear material. Between now and the spring, we have a chance to negotiate a comprehensive agreement that prevents a nuclear-armed Iran, secures America and our allies, including Israel, while avoiding yet another Middle East conflict. The American people expect us only to go war as a last resort, and I intend to stay true to that wisdom. Basically saying if an Iran sanctions bill turns up on his desk, he's going to veto it. My conclusions are, first of all, it was a very strong speech, aggressive, he was on the front foot, like those great opening batsmen that the West Indies had. You start heading the ball straight off the bat. Sometimes I think he's just too cerebral, too intellectual, and he's progressed the US national interest, and I have issues with his assassination program, I really do, I think it's appalling. But he's advanced the US national interest in a really sophisticated 21st century manner, using oil warfare, currency warfare, coercion, and in a manner that I think many of his predecessors probably would not even have comprehended the landscape in which he has operated. And I think that's part of the political challenge for him. Put up a photograph of him delivering his State of the Union address. As I said on the 12th of January, the US economy is the comeback kid of 2015. He mentioned the jobs they've created, the most jobs since 1999, and lower oil prices are a tailwind worth $1 trillion, which is meaningful. Same time, 12th of January, but previously I've been speaking about this, I called him the oil warfare specialist. Barack Obama successfully wrestled the price of crude to below $50 a barrel, and with that effected a chokehold on Russia, Venezuela, and others as far afield as Nigeria and Angola. Of course, the US is the big winner and is the comeback kid of 2015. I like this photograph that NBC News tweeted of him, and they said, economy gives Obama slight lift. Slight lift? Goodness. On the 1st of December, I wrote about US emerges as the new price setter for the oil market. And I was then making my prediction, which I made on the 13th of October, that the price was about to fall below 50. And I said, that US, by becoming the new price setter, this is a deep and important geopolitical development, and I think that's what he was referring to in that speech as well. This plan to undercut oil was exquisitely constructed and executed. And he's really been a subtle, skilled, hard-nosed exponent of currency in our oil warfare. And I think that the oil price collapse marks a major inflection point. And then have a look at the article I wrote on the 13th of October when I asked who kneecapped prices in global oil markets. I started with Thomas Donilon, who said in 2011, would you believe, America's new energy posture allows us to engage from a position of strength. Increasing US energy supplies act as a cushion that helps reduce our vulnerability, increases the vulnerability of the other oil producers to global supply disruptions and price shocks. It also affords us a stronger hand in pursuing and implementing our international security goals. I said then the US administration has turned price slasher, and like in Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, oil has been sliced up real good. I was saying they're using it as a geopolitical spear, and I was saying then it's not too difficult to calculate who will be the biggest losers, Putin. Times of Oman tweeted Houthis have taken over the Yemeni presidential palace. I'll put up the photograph, it's quite arresting. This photograph I found on The Guardian was arresting as well. Douma, Syria, residents of the besieged rebel town 8 miles northeast of Damascus, ride through the street at night during a blackout. Pretty arresting photograph. Gorbachev, very interesting interview in Der Spiegel. It gives one a feeling of déjà vu. Perhaps that would even make a good headline for this interview. Everything appears to be repeating itself. There was a time for building a wall and a time for tearing it down. I'm not the only person to thank for the fact that this wall no longer exists. But he says, now new walls are being built and the situation is threatening to escalate. I do, in fact, see all the signs of a new Cold War. Things could blow up at any time if we don't act, he said. The loss of trust is disastrous. Moscow no longer believes the West, and the West doesn't believe Moscow. That's terrible. Do you think it's possible there could be another major war in Europe? Such a scenario shouldn't even be considered. Such a war today would inevitably lead to a nuclear war, but the statements from both sides and the propaganda lead me to fear the worst. If one side loses its nerve in this inflamed atmosphere, then we won't survive the coming years. Then the Spiegel asked the new Russian military doctrine. It labels NATO's eastern expansion and the reinforcement of NATO's offensive capabilities as one of the primary threats facing Russia. Do you agree? NATO's eastward expansion has destroyed the European security architecture as it was defined in the Helsinki Final Act in 1975. The eastern expansion was a 180-degree reversal, a departure from the decision of the Paris Charter in 1990, taken together by all the European states to put the Cold War behind us for good. I like this tweet, photograph from Glenn Gilmore of I Have a Dream, the Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C. in 1963. Just look at this photograph of the Saudi king, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, listening to the US Secretary of State John Kerry before a meeting at the Royal Palace in Jeddah. And now this photograph is largely seen by people who've connected the markets, as I have, with the moment that the US came with their request to the Saudis to absolutely collapse the price of oil. Pepe Escobar is saying, what game is the House of Saud playing? House of Saud now finds itself in times of extreme trouble. Their risky oil price war may eventually backfire. The succession of King Abdullah may turn into a bloodbath, and the American protector may be musing a change of heart. US President Obama in this interview openly admitted that he wanted disruptions in the price of oil because he figured Russian President Putin would have enormous difficulty managing it. So that settles the argument about hurting Russia and US-Saudi collusion. After US Secretary of State John Kerry endorsed King Abdullah in Jeddah to simultaneously raise oil production and embark on a cut-price strategy. I'm not of the view that they are playing a game. I'm of the view that they take instructions. I like this, a simple diagram of the Arab uprisings and their aftermath. Robert Fisk is saying, very occasionally the Israelis go for the jugular. The helicopter attack on terrorists near the Syrian city of Quneitra at the weekend certainly drew aside the curtain of Hezbollah Iranian assistance to President Assad's regime in Damascus. I'll leave you with one quote from a very interesting article by Nick Turse. Have a look at the article in full. It's on Rich Wrap-Ups. The command is at its absolute zenith, and it is indeed a golden age for special operations. Those were the words of Army General Joseph Votel III, a West Point graduate and Army Ranger, as he assumed command of SOCOM last August. International markets, let's start with this photograph from The Guardian. Armed police stand on the roof of the Congress Hotel on the eve of WEF. The theme of the meeting, which will take place from 21st to 24th January, is the new global context. Currency markets, euro is a little bit higher at 115.80. Dollar index 92.77. I'm a big bull about the dollar. Japanese yen 117.78. Swissy 0.8726. Pound 151.68. Aussie 0.8217. India rupee 61.585. South Korean won 1084.28. Rial 261.45. Egyptian pound has been on the weakening trend. 7.30.16. They cut rates not too long ago. South African rand 11.57.85. Dollar index. I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target remains as it has for a while, 100. Euro dollar, I'll put up a 3-month chart. My target remains parity. Interesting piece I came across Bloomberg about the number of bonds in the market which are now at negative interest rates. The volume of such debt has swelled to 1.4 trillion euros from 500 billion euros in October. Look at that. Yields on 10-year Swissy government bonds have plunged to negative 0.09%. 5-year German bonds yielding negative 0.04%. Across Europe's $7.1 trillion market for government debt, yields are paying a record low of 0.86%, less than 1/3 of the average during the past decade. 12th of Jan, I wrote, if European bond yields, which are at record all-time lows, are the signal in the noise, then this means Europe is in danger of a major death spiral. And have a look at that article. I called it the year of G2 as Europe off balance, commodity markets. As I said earlier, I do not see a near-term bounce in the oil price. I think it could average $50 a barrel for the next 24 months. I don't think there's a Hail Mary pass coming. And in fact, what people are doing is instead of throttling back on supply, they're pumping more, creating a further implosion in the price. Put up a 5-day chart. I'm looking to resell it. Gold, highest level since August 20, 1293.845, getting a safe haven bid. Let's move to Africa. At least 4 people were killed on Monday in clashes between security forces and protesters in the DRC's capital as opposition parties tried to block a change in the law that may delay elections due in 2016. Police fired in the air on Tuesday to disperse demonstrators who were protesting, by the way, for a second day. I'll put up some tweets, some photographs. DW_English, Congo police fire at protesters. Michael Tishi seen in Kinshasa, roads on fire, situation very tense, barricades, and this is only the beginning, he said. Dunya Network, Kinshasa police, pretty formidable looking. And I take you back to the 10th of November when I wrote about Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa. I was saying that, the tipping point for that accelerated sequence of events was Blaise Compaoré trying to stack Parliament in order to extend his presidential term limit. And Martin Aglo, a law student, said after the Arab Spring, this is the Black Spring. And I was asking, there is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. Can you shoot 100? Can you shoot 1,000? Can you shoot 10,000? You can't go beyond that. Where that threshold lies, of course, is discovered during the throes of the situation. And I called Burkina Faso a situation where they gained escape velocity. And I concluded by saying, the country's youth flex their muscles. What's clear is that a very young, very informed and very connected African youth demographic, many characterize it as a demographic dividend, I call it a terminator in some cases, turned into a demographic terminator for beautiful Blaise. SMS and internet turned off in Kinshasa. Zambian elections, good question. Daily Maverick asks, this is just a trailer for the 2016 election. I think that's a fair point. Put up a photograph of an official looking on as voters queue to cast votes in the Zambian presidential election. So South African all-share bounced to marginally 0.026% yesterday. It's down 1.24% year-to-date. Dollar rand 11.5971. I think it's going to 12. Egyptian pound sharply weaker now, 7.30. Egyptian stock market sharply higher, 2.14% higher yesterday. It's up 9.87% year-to-date. And I think Africa's best. Nigeria, by contrast, Africa's worst, and probably the world's worst, down 13.96%, but it rallied another 0.15% yesterday. The Naira has slumped 14% against the dollar in the past 6 months and traded above 190 earlier this week. The central bank did not change rates. There was no need for a change because the policy measures announced in November need to take effect, said a strategist at Deja Bank. Basically, I said to Reuters that in the teeth of a raging insurgency and an extraordinary collapse in the price of oil, that, doing nothing was probably the best thing to do. But the point being, I said I think the currency is headed to 220, and Emefiele's finger in the Dyke strategy is about to be overwhelmed by a tsunami. put up a photograph. Contact Salkida tweeted this crowd in Kano, all for the opposition. Let's hope and work for a free and fair election. The markets, as I said, on the 10th of November in Nigeria have been wagadooged, and it continues to be a false market. They've drained liquidity, so it's just there's very little trading going on. We are the ones that carried out the attack, and it is just the tip of the iceberg, the man says. There are more coming. Commenting on weapons seized from Baga, he says there are enough to annihilate Nigeria. Of course, that's Abu Bakr Shekau. Jonathan, you're in trouble, he says. And Buhari, do you think he's a true Muslim? He's an infidel, he says. I'll put a poster advertising for the search of Boko Haram leader Abu Bakr Shekau, pasted on a wall in Baga village on the outskirts of Maiduguri. In May 2013, the Ghana Stock Exchange is minus 1.8% year-to-date. Kala Holdings, previously Citadel Capital, is investing in East African cargo as China builds rail link. They've got they run the current RVR, the old 100-year-old railway, and they're now knitting it up and putting together a sort of door-to-door service. And I said about it, Kenya remains the pivot state in East Africa and the route to the sea and the world markets for a lot of countries in East Africa. RVR has devised a good strategy of integrating the railway with a door-to-door delivery service. And this was his vision from a while back, in point of fact. Unbelievable, very interesting man. I'll put up a photograph of Fort Jesus, which I quite liked. Swazi King delays school so that students can weed his fields. You've got to read that to believe it. Ebola, most African countries avoid major economic loss, but impact on Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone remains crippling. That's the World Bank. Fatou Bensouda has issued the Uhuru Kenyatta OTP pre-trial brief. It's on Script and on the website. Coca-Cola joins list of global firms cutting Kenya jobs. Other local subsidiaries of global firms that have recently sacked staff are Nestle, Tata Chemicals, Share Karaturi, Cadbury. Nestle sent 46 staff home last week. This is clearly not a good sign, is it? Kenya shilling was lost at 91.60. The Nairobi All Share fell 1.13% yesterday. It's up 0.68% year to date. NSE 20 is up 0.52% year to date. If you haven't read this article by my friend Manoj at Samsung, who was also my guest last year at Mindspeak, he's called it the next frontier and the final frontier. And really it's very interesting. Listen to this. Talk about innovation. And saying, people here are too scared of sharing their ideas. And then he says, but let me explain it differently. The ocean sea is common for all, but some take out pearls, some take out fish, some go on cruises, some just wet their leg, and some live on boats. You see it as food for some, shelter for some, business for some, and leisure for some others. Saying the world is the same for all of us, but we get what we look for. Have a look at his Mindspeak session. If you want to check out any share at the stock market, look at the link. And yesterday, as I said, the All Share followed on its drawdown at 0.56% on Monday, with a further 1.133% drawdown. So we've been on the back foot earlier this week. Interesting data came out about Mshwari, that they've dispersed loans amounting to 24 billion shilling, which is not much shy of $300 million. It's been trading in a trading range. Safaricom, we're at the bottom of the trading range. We're going to bounce from here. Uchumi, that's up 28.955% so far this year, after a strong bounce the back end of last year. KQ up 8.045% higher. KCB supply thinning out. I think it's headed a lot higher and through an all-time high of 60. HFCK was strong yesterday. Have a look at the rights issue details. You buy one rights issue at 30 shillings for every 2 held. And EABL, about which I'm very bullish. I think it's going to 400 on the move higher. And Mume Sugar, which had rallied 79.48%. Beginning of the year through yesterday morning, corrected lower. I think a lot of people will be looking at that this morning. If you need to follow the stock market, just register on rich.co.ke, get a password, it's free, go to Rich Live and plug yourself in during trading hours. Once again, thank you for stopping by.